right, joining us here at the Ag Excellence Conference, we have Richard Phillips. You're speaking as part of a panel here about policy, what government will look like in terms of how it relates to agriculture in 2050, so 35 years from now. Do you think that the direction we've seen recently, not just recently, in government policy, restricting farmers and talking about losing social license, that kind of thing, do you think we will have a different perspective on agriculture by 2050?
By 2050, I think it'll be very different. It's nice to talk about social license in the good times when everything's good and you're having big crops all over the world and food prices are relatively low. I think it's only going to take one or two major food crises in this world with a growing population and major natural disaster somewhere. You're going to see big spikes in prices of food. And I think the other thing that we haven't seen in the past is I think you're going to have literally national security risks in places where there's not enough food. People are just not going to let their children go hungry. They're going to want their governments to take action. There'll be protests, there'll be marches. People will become more in this global world more alarmed when they start to see big protests over food. And I think at that point in time, you're going to have governments in the major food producing companies step back a bit and say, okay, clearly for world peace and stability even, we need to have a solid and steady production of food all over the world. And so how can we help farmers to produce more food? And I think you'll see a major shift from the social license part to how can we have that stable food supply in the world. I think that will come, and it will only take one or two food crises in this world with spiking prices for that to happen.
So what does that mean for policy for farmers? Does that mean access to technology that there isn't access to now, or how does that?
I think governments will be far more amenable to understanding what has to happen to increase food production and the tools that farmers need in their toolbox to do that. And I don't think they will be as concerned with trying to block it or listen to the activist groups. That's not to say that activists don't play a strong role in bringing forward concerns. Is there enough testing? Is it proven safe? Those are all fair questions, and I think we as farmers need to be proactive in addressing those, making sure the food inspection agencies are only approving things that are good. But once it's approved, then it's full speed ahead. That's where I see the world going.
How about from more of the demographic angle? We'll probably have fewer farmers in 2050 than we have now?
Sure. Just in the last 40 years, we've had a drop of almost 60% in the number of farmers, and there'll be another big drop again by that point in time as farms get larger. So the reality is, in the old days, maybe you had a lot of rural seats that where farmers had a lot of say in who got elected. That's going to be gone. There'll be no real farmer members of parliament. It's going to be urban caucuses, urban people, their values, views. So I think it's really critical that if we're going to influence that as farmers going forward, people need to be active in their farm organizations, whether it's the pulse growers, the beef, the pork, whatever industry you're in, you should be active in your association because you're going to have to get to those MPs and explain how agriculture is done. I know people talk about educating the general public, trying to reach 40 million Canadians and educate them. That's a pretty big hill to climb, but there are key pressure points along the way where you can ensure that your regulators and your elected officials understand the importance of this, and that's where we need to focus.
So speaking of those farm groups and participating in them, will we see consolidation there as well?
Oh, I think so. I think when you have people farming 25,000 acres in Saskatchewan or 50,000 acres or these large farms, people are going to look at the size of their checkoff bills, which are all refundable, and they're going to say, well, why am I paying all these checkoffs to all these organizations? And it become larger and larger numbers. Even chartered accountants can say, you're paying $7,000 to this organization, $10,000 to this one. Those are big numbers. And so I think groups need to be really proactive in saying, how can we work together? How can we share a website person between all of the major commodity groups in Saskatchewan or Alberta? How can we share one accounting firm to do a standardized set of books for all of us? How can we work together on all those communication challenges? Because there's nothing worse, and I say this as a lobbyist, when you're in talking to a member of parliament or a member of the provincial legislature, when they're confused as to you're the canola growers, you're the canola council, or you're the other guys, and you're someone else, you're the canola crushing association. Well, why can't you guys just all talk in one voice? What does canola need? That's the sort of stuff that's really confusing, and the more we can all be in one group, or even across all the grain sector and then the livestock sector, I think there'll be mergers because we need a more common voice working together. At the end of the day, those urban people have visions of agriculture, and it doesn't matter what sector you're in. They just think there's an idyllic world that you should farm in. And it doesn't matter whether it's pulses or wheat or barley or oats. We all have the same challenge in front of us dealing with that public.
What about public extension? Will ag departments still have a role, or what will their role be in 2050?
Well, I think agriculture, one key piece of agriculture that farmers will always want and that is research. So they're going to want public research investment, especially in the upstream research. On the other piece, on the extension side, look at the changes. Like 40 years ago on our farm, if you had a bug problem or an issue, a disease, you phoned the local ag rep, and the local agricultural representative from the government came out and looked at it and told you what it was. Today, people go to their local agrologist. Wherever they're buying farm supplies, they usually have an agrologist on site. That's who comes out. And if they want a second opinion, they'll get a different agrologist to come out. But that actual extension piece will probably fade away to a large degree. And the other piece, though, that could grow is that at the end of the day, when private sector is telling you something, people are a little suspicious sometimes. Well, of course, they're trying to sell me their product. So is there a role for the public sector or the Department of Agriculture to do like Tom Wolfe, for example, checking spray nozzles? That's the sort of information that is absolutely invaluable to farmers, and it's trusted by farmers because they do want that neutral opinion, not just the sales pitch from the individual companies.
Mm-hmm. Well, looks like lots of things to prepare for, and thanks for your insight, Richard.
Good, thanks very much.